Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today I want to talk to you about Jane Eyre and why it's the perfect book for this channel. So if you watched my weekly wrap-up video a couple of weekends ago, you will know that I recently read Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte and really enjoyed it. And Jane Eyre may not seem like an obvious book to talk about on a channel that focuses on crime, pulp and horror. But I think that the strength of Jane Eyre is the fact that it contains elements of all of those things and more, and that's what makes it a really great book. So I've had struggles recently with classics, and Jane Eyre clearly is a classic. But if you've watched the channel, over the last few months, you will know I set myself this project of reading classic books, and really struggle with a lot of them. There were a few I enjoyed, but a lot of them I didn't enjoy, and a lot of them I DNF'd. There was just something about the way they were told, particularly with Dickens. So one of the books I tried was Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. And I just found this impenetrable wall of language between me and the story, which I really struggled with. Jane Eyre, on the other hand, I found immediately and completely accessible, and really enjoyable. And I think the overall strength of the book is Jane as a character. But I think there are so many different styles of story woven into that book that pretty much anyone would find something that they enjoy in it. And I think that's why it has become such an enduring classic. So if you don't know the story, you probably do, but just in case you don't. So the story is about this young girl called Jane Eyre, whose parents have died, and she's being looked after. She's like the ward of her aunt, who's got terrible, who's got like this son who's terrible, who's always awful to Jane, and it's about Jane kind of growing up from childhood and escaping from that environment, finding work for herself in a school that she ends up going to, and just setting herself up as an independent woman, and also about her relationship with a guy called Mr. Rochester, who is a wealthy man who employs her to be a governess for this young girl who lives in his house. He basically is his ward, and I won't go into who she is because that would be a bit of a spoiler, but that really is what the story is about. So it doesn't sound like crime, pulp or horror, does it? But it has all of those elements in it. So if you've read the book, you will know that there's some sequences very early on involving something called the Red Room, which are incredibly effective and creepy and horrible. And there are other parts later on in the book when Jane is living with Mr. Rochester, which also have this weird, uncanny sense of mystery about them, which are really effective pieces of horror fiction, I think, of horror writing. There's also a central mystery, a few mysteries running through the book. So firstly, about who this young girl is who lives with Rochester, but also about items from Rochester's past, why he isn't married and things like that. So there's all this stuff kind of woven into it. So mystery is a really important part of what makes Jane Eyre such an engaging and enjoyable book, I think. Charlotte Bronte manages to weave through it all of these little threads of things where you kind of think you're gradually getting towards understanding what's happening, and because you care about Jane as a character, you really want to understand. You really want to understand the background to everything, and you want, as she does, to understand, to fully understand, in particular, Rochester as a character. So I think I've kind of made and I would say as well, the revelations that come out in terms of some of these mysteries definitely have crime elements in them, and there's a kind of dark gothic backstory to all of this, which is really effective and comes out as the story progresses. So I think I've kind of covered crime and horror through those. But what about pulp? Is Jane Eyre pulpy? So it occurred to me reading it that it is a very episodic story. And it reads in some ways as if it was published originally as a serial, which I don't believe it was. I think it was first published as a novel. So unlike the work of Dickens or someone like that, where their books were serialised, I don't think Jane Eyre was published like that originally. But it really has that feeling, and I think part of the reason for that is it is a coming-of-age story, and it follows Jane, it follows her through her childhood, through her adolescence, and into young adulthood. And that journey she goes on, where she travels a lot as well, she lives in different places as she goes through that journey, gives the book a very episodic feel. But Jane as a central character pulls you as the reader through all of that. And that is something that is, common to pulp stories. Pulp stories are often revolve around a central character who goes on, various adventures. And those adventures, make up their whole story. So I think there are definite elements of kind of pulpishness to this book. And also it is wonderfully dramatic, and indeed melodramatic. There is so much drama and emotion and things like that baked into the pages of Jane Eyre, that it really is a wonderfully rich and enjoyable read, in the same way that pulp books can be. It's that kind of, all human life is here kind of read, where the author just throws everything into the mix, and it works perfectly as a result. And I would say as well, some of the twists and turns of the story, and the way that Charlotte Bronte gradually ramps up the tension is incredible. So particularly the stuff of the revelations about Rochester's past, and the way the tension is gradually ramped up to the point when you find out exactly what's happening and everything kind of explodes. Not literally, although that would be interesting, wouldn't it? Everything, kind of dramatically explodes in terms of the relationship of the characters to each other and things like that. It just works wonderfully, and it has a real kind of almost soap opera type punch to it, that I really, really enjoyed. And that comes because Jane is such a wonderful character, and you really, really do care about her by that point. So yeah, to my surprise, I went into Jane Eyre not really expecting to enjoy it that much. Not, having a vague awareness of the story. I think I probably saw a TV adaptation when I was a kid, so I had an awareness of the story, but didn't remember the details. So yeah, went into it without, if you'll pardon the pun, great expectations. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think, like the very best of books, it's good and has endured because it combines all those different things that we look for in a story. It's got humour, it's got romance, it's got drama, it's got horror, it's got mystery, and all of those things together make for a great book. Okay, time for a random book from the shelves. Today's book is A Clash of Kings by George R.R. Martin, the second in the A Song of Ice and Fire series. So Martin is another author who, like Bronte, I think, does a wonderful job of just giving you everything in a book. So there are very scary bits in the Game of Thrones books. There's romance, there's drama, there's action, there's intrigue, there's betrayal. He throws everything in, and he does it really, really skillfully, like Bronte does, and that makes for a really engaging and enjoyable story. So I hope you found that interesting. Let me know if you've read Jane Eyre and what you thought of it. Let me know if I've convinced you that it is indeed crime, pulp and horror. And as always, thank you very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're reading good stuff, and I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.